Well, this morning I am outside in sunny Florida enjoying the weather here that we have. What a beautiful day it is. I hear the birds singing behind me, and this week my wife and I have been fasting with our friends from the small group, from our small group at church. So I just wanted to take a few moments and share something with you. I've been really blessed this week because this week, the past 2 weeks, I got in contact with an old friend of mine named Pat Milligan. Pat Milligan was the youth director in Ohio, or Kentucky, I believe. It was Kentucky. And he brought his teens to Hoosier Hills Baptist Camp every year. And then on this certain year, he was, as camp was closing, the director that was there was leaving. He was became a pastor at a church, was going to be going there, and Brother Doyle had asked Pat Milligan to be the new camp director, which was a great move on his part because Pat is so great with teenagers. What blessed me so much was that Pat saw value in me, and Pat reached out to me on the very last day and said, "Hey, next year, I'm going to be the director." And he said, "I want you to be my assistant director at camp." And what an honor and a privilege for me that he had that faith in me. And we built a very close friendship, not just working together, but friendship. And I learned a lot underneath Pat. And there's so much to tell, but as I'm talking to Pat Milligan now, and we're conversing weekly with it, I'm reminded of a story today that I want to share with you. At camp, we always had it was a sports camp basically. We did all sorts of stuff. They played soccer, basketball, all this stuff. Now I was not very good at any of that. So my talents came in the music part and the skits competitions and stuff like that. But there was every year, and this one year in particular, we had every year at all campers week we do a cross country meet, and this is a big event because it's the biggest trophy. It stood about this tall, and so when it came to that week, this special all campers week, we had a kid there named Tony Sism. Now, Tony Sism came from my church, and Tony was he had actually, I believe, won state that year in cross country. He was phenomenal runner. Tony, every morning at camp, would get up and he would run the perimeter of the camp. As we were waking up, getting ready to go start our day, and we're going to the shower house to clean, you could see Tony running. Now, Tony did this for two reasons. One, Tony did love to run, but he did it for a second reason. He was psyching out all his competition that week, letting them know that he was going to win that trophy at the end of the week. Well, when the end of the week came, we always did that was the last competition we did. And so it was Friday night, Friday afternoon, we all meet up by the dam at the camp. And the guys, what we would do is they would run the perimeter, outside perimeter of it, and then they would come and run around the end of the dam, and that would be the finish line where they would run. And I would say it was about a 3-mile run that they would go on. Every year when we would do this, you would have tons of guys who would actually run this and be involved in it. But this particular time, when Pat Milligan asked all the guys to come up and run, we only had like maybe 5-6 guys that came up there to the line. And the reason was, what Tony did throughout the week worked. He discouraged everybody else out there. They were like, well, he's cross country and champ at state. He's ran every morning. This is we're not going to win. We can't win. And you know what's amazing to me? That's how life is. Everybody wants to be the first place winner. And I get I don't get the competition, okay? I have some friends. My pastor is one of them. Very competitive person, right? I'm just not, I don't know why I'm not competitive, but I'm not competitive to that degree that I have to, I've got to get first place in everything. Now, I want to be the best at what I do. And I guess you see this more in sports than you do other stuff, because in the other things in my life, I work for excellence in it. But I also know I'm not an athlete, right? So I think it's the mind of an athlete that we're seeing here as well. But since there was only 5 guys who came up, and one of them was Tony Sism, Pat Milligan walked over to the line where all these guys, and you got to understand, this week there had to be at least 100 teenage boy campers there, right? Pat Milligan walked up to him and said, "Hey, why are you guys not running?" And they were like, you could just see they were defeated. And Pat gave this little inspirational speech and said, "Listen, guys, will one of you take to the challenge here and challenge Tony? Don't be already defeated." He said, "Who can I count on to stand up and run?" And in the crowd of these boys, so about 95 boys now, because 5 of them are up here, right? One boy stands up, and his name was James. Now, let me tell you a little bit about James. We love James, but James was slow. James was autistic, but you couldn't help but love James, because James would smile all the time, and he would give his 100% into everything that we did at camp, right? And he's just one of those kids you just loved. James is the one who stood up and said, "I'll do it." And James walked to the starting line. Now, Pat looks at the rest of these guys, and he is like, "Shame on you guys. Look at this. James is willing to take the challenge." Out of shame, I think 8 to 10 more guys came up there to run. Now, I got to tell you, so at this point, let's just give it the benefit of the doubt. Maybe there's 20 boys running at this point. Now, you got to understand, normally we have 60 to 70 boys who are running at this moment for this event, because during this time season, cross country was the event that you wanted to win, because it was the biggest trophy, right? So anyways, Pat gets them all up there and he says, "Listen, on your mark." And when he said "on your mark," Tony Sism gets down in this crouching mode, and you see all the other guys look at him and they do the same. He said, "On your mark, get set." And then Tony rises up just a little bit, ready to go. And you look over here to the far end, and here's James downing a Mountain Dew. I'll never forget this. He's downing a Mountain Dew, and I go, "James, are you ready?" Because the other guys are mounted and ready to do. James looks over and he sees him. He throws his drink to the side and he goes, trying to imitate the pose. Now, here's the thing. James did not have the ability to do what they were doing, but James was willing to mimic it and try it, right? And Pat said, "On your mark, get set, go." And they all took off running, right? And you even saw there was 1 or 2 that were in front of Tony going. But as you look at the starting line, here's James putting the lid back on his Mountain Dew. And I'm like, "Run, James, run." And James like, "Okay." And James starts going at the slowest pace you could ever imagine anyone running, right? Well, get to the runners that are running. As they're running this race, we get to the first turn in it. And this is over by the baseball diamonds, for you that remember camp. Something happened that no one could take account for. And what took place was Tony Sism, the main character in this competition, the main person's name that I've used the most in this story, steps into a pothole and twists his ankle. And in a moment, in an instant, his ankle is sprained. Tony is out of the race. Now you look over here at the rest of these guys that didn't compete in this. And you could see them, I shoulda, coulda, woulda, never gets you anywhere, does it? They couldn't win the race because they didn't get in the race because of this person, Tony. What they didn't know was what God knew, that Tony would step in a pothole and would be out of the race. A lot of times in our life, that's what happens. We don't even get engaged in life because we're so competitive, or we have to be first place, or it's not worth doing. Someone else is better than me, this and that, because we already got it. We're already defeated before we even get to that point, right? Well, that mindset is what held me back for several years in my life. You know, my identity was often misplaced by other people, and I let other people, other situations, the enemy create my identity instead of allowing Jesus Christ to make my identity and be it. I was doing devotions today. I read 1 Corinthians 16. It says, be watchful, stand firm in faith, act like men, be strong. Let all that you do be done in love. I want to go back into this. Be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men. Well, I have started a website called Intentional Guy. We're actually in ministry right now, Intentional Guy. And this verse here is really hitting me, because we have a lot of people a lot of men in our world that do not act like men, especially men of faith. We're not strong at all. We are already defeated. The enemy has our ears, and we are defeated. And we don't know what's around the corner. That cross-country meet, you know who won that cross-country meet? A freshman whose name I don't even know. But one of the youngest, skinniest, smallest kid there won the cross-country tournament that day and took home the biggest trophy that we ever had. The truth is, sitting in that crowd of about 80 boys that were left on the sideline was probably more guys with more ability and capability of beating that freshman guy and taking home that trophy. But what they failed to do was just even get involved in the race because their faith was not strong enough to be involved in it. And sometimes our desire to want to take home the first place ribbon is so big that if we can't get first, we're just going to take ourselves out. Well, guess what? Not everybody can be first place. There's a second place ribbon and a third place ribbon, right? And those are worth having too, because they'll show accomplishments that took place. And all those boys that day, those 20 boys that ran that race, they showed something that day. They showed that they had more faith and more strength and more character than the 80 guys that were sitting on the sideline. But the story doesn't stop there. We got up, we got everybody together, and we're like, it's time now to go to the tabernacle where we're going to present this trophy to the winner. I mean, this is the part where everybody's excited about, right? So all the counselor lines that get their kids all together, you count them to make sure you got all the kids, and all of a sudden one person go, hey, we're missing one. And it dawned on all of us at this moment. Now, you got to understand, this race has been over for probably about 20 minutes or more. And we forgot, where's James? We did not notice that James has not come back yet. And at that moment, I remember me and Pat were like, ooh, we need to send a search party to go find James, right? When out in the crowd, you hear this one kid say, there he is. And it was James. Let me tell you something. James was still running the same pace. He was, but you could see on his face, this kid was dead. He's running 3 miles. First off, he has probably never walked 3 miles, let alone run 3 miles in his life. And let me tell you, at this point, he was at a slow drag. And man, when you looked at him, oh God, you could tell he was discouraged. He was like, huh. But you know what? What another lesson we learned. James didn't quit. And so, as James is coming around the dam to finish up, he's barely dragging, but he's still going. This empowered the 250 teenagers that we had at camp that week. We didn't do this. We didn't organize this, tell them to do it. The next thing me and Pat Milligan watch and observe are these teenagers who make a tunnel around the dam. And all of a sudden you hear them start chanting, James, James, James. It was crazy. The crowd was going nuts. All of a sudden James hears his name being called. And he's probably never in his life had 250 people cheer his name like that, right? All of a sudden you see a smile come on James's face. His head stick up a little bit. His chest come out. And James starts moving a little faster. And as he gets to these 250 kids who have made a tunnel for him, they all start giving him high fives, yelling his name. And James is giving them high fives and all this stuff going. And I'm telling you what, I will never forget the smile that was on this young teenage boy with autism's face. You know what else I won't forget? Are the teenagers, even the ones who did not run in the race, who were smiling and could not wait to high five this young autistic boy. And you know why the reason is they wanted to do this? Because he had something that they didn't have. He had faith, he had courage, he had strength, and he proved himself a man that day. The teenage boys from his cabin picked James up on their shoulder. And James got a victory walk all the way to the tabernacle. James got last place, but yet he was the one who got the biggest trophy that day, really. Got the acceptance of all of his peers. To this day, none of us remember the name of the boy who got first place. But I will tell you who we remember today is the boy named James, who had enough faith, had enough strength, and was a man that day who never gave up. Makes you think about your life right now, right? Where are you today in your life? Some of you have had life has stomped on you, hasn't it? It has crushed you. It has demolished you. Because why? That's what life does. But let me ask you, are you going to be like these other boys that just sat on the sidelines? Or are you going to be like James? It may be too late to get first place in the race, but you're going to get in the race, right? But the truth is, you don't know what is around the corner. Only God does. I'm telling you what, I'm living my best life right now. I have found redemption in Jesus Christ. I have been restored from a fall I have never seen other people restored from in my life. And now my joy is to help other men. I hope today this story helps you in your walk with Christ. You guys have a blessed day.